watching ERi-TV, dear viewers. Welcome to this week's special edition of Open Mic with my guest for this evening, Mr. James Wakiaga. He is the UNDP resident representative here to Eritrea. Welcome to our program.
Thank you very much, Rafael.
Okay, so our topic for this evening is going to be about the Human Development Report 2019 and what agenda it has. But first, we are going to start with the UNDP's function here in Eritrea.
Thank you,
Mr. James.
much. Thank you very much, Rafael, to have me in the studio and for the opportunity to not only just discuss about the recently launched UNDP Human Development Report 2019, but also the work and the partnership that we have with the government of Eritrea. The partnership that we have is excellent. As you know, UNDP is a premier development institution, and here in Eritrea, we are enjoying very cordial relationship as a neutral broker and a partner of choice for the government and people of Eritrea. We've engaged in several initiatives to foster the government agenda in terms of sustainable development, but also to achieve Agenda 2030.
All right. Okay, Mr. James, now I want to talk about this Human Development Report. It is being released under the central banner of inequalities in human development in the 21st century. Why inequality?
Yes, inequality is the topic for the 2019 Human Development Report, and it's about inequalities in human development in the 21st century, looking beyond income, looking beyond averages, and looking beyond today. The world we live today, there's been major transformative shifts around climatic change, shifts in technological change, and all these shifts have tremendous impact in terms of perpetuating inequalities in the world. These inequalities are being seen beyond income, and when you talk about beyond income, we are saying we have to go beyond just looking at the GNI per capita, but looking at the socioeconomic and other processes that actually influence or impact on inequalities in the world. We have to go beyond averages, because we cannot just look, for example, at the Gini coefficient as a measure of inequality, which is just a single digit. But let's look at averages. We have to go beyond averages and looking at other impacts, you know, in terms of the socio-economic as well as cultural processes. We have to look beyond today, because the generation of today are not thinking just about today. We're also thinking about what the future is like. For instance, the impact of climate change, which is impacting a lot of communities. And unfortunately, you find those who contribute less to climate change, particularly those in sub-Saharan Africa and other developing countries, seem to bear the heaviest burden of climate change. And you can see in terms of the changing patterns on rainfall patterns in sub-Saharan Africa. We can see it in terms of rising levels of oceans. And these are actually things which are impacting on the poverty levels. And then finally, looking at the impact, for example, on technological change in terms of the artificial intelligence and how this has impact on the future of work. Artificial intelligence can contribute to better opportunities in terms of labor demand, but it can also have negative impact in terms of loss of jobs. And to what extent are our countries prepared to be part and parcel of this future? And this tends to create inequalities, particularly between those who are in the low human development income category and those in the very high developed human development category. And so these are some of the issues the report digs deeper to try and see what are the things, what are some of the policies we need to think about beginning today and not to wait until it's too late for us to begin addressing the challenge of inequalities.
Okay. In this report, I see here in front of me, what are the factors that categorize you to be doing good?
What the human development concept, and basically the concept of the Human Development Index is to go beyond income. And it looks at the three dimensions. One, the dimension on health, which is measured in terms of the life expectancy, the dimension of income in terms of the GNI per capita, and then the dimension of education in terms of the completion rate as well as expected years of schooling. And so using this dimension, we are able to calculate a Human Development Index and then categorize countries based on very high Human Development Index, the medium, and then the low category of the Human Development Index. And so in a sense, it's really going beyond just looking at the GNI per capita to be able to judge whether the society is making progress or not. And I'm happy to say that if you look at the sub-Saharan Africa in general, there's been quite some progress in terms of the value of the Human Development Index. Countries are basically making progress. And for instance, you look at Eritrea, on the dimension of life expectancy, you find the life expectancy is over 64, which is way beyond the African average of 61, you know. And so which means investments that the country has been making in the area of health are beginning to bear fruit in terms of the longevity of life, but also in terms of a cut on infant mortality, issues around maternal mortality rate, and incidentally, these are the MDGs where Eritrea did exceptionally well in this continent and the world as a whole.
Okay. So there's of course indexing and ranking of these countries.
Yes,
yeah?
Of course, ranking is just based on the values, and for me, I think importantly is to really look at the value, and the value then will be able to give you the different dimension. How are we doing in the area of health in terms of the life expectancy? How are we doing in the area of education in terms of the completion rate, expected years of schooling? How are we doing in terms of income per capita, because income is still important. And at the same time, the whole idea about Human Development Report is an independent report, and the idea is to provoke policy discussion to really look at what are the things really matter in terms of contribution to development agenda. And the whole issue around data is equally important. How do we help countries to continue investing in good quality data that can help in terms of creating perfection, even in the way we calculate the Human Development Index?
All right. Mr. James, it's not about our country being categorized at a low or at a high level, but I want to ask you which areas in specifics that Eritrea needs to work on, and which areas that we are doing good at.
Yeah, I think as I mentioned, if you look at the area of health based on the indicator on life expectancy, and you look at the life expectancy, the average age, you know, for life expectancy is beyond even the African average. In the area of income per capita, the Eritreans, based on this current report, there's been a appreciable increase in income per capita between 1990, when it was $895 per day, to the current one, which is almost $1,600, which is almost 90% growth. In the area of education, I think that's where we can see there hasn't been an appreciable progress, and this could be one area where we need to dig further. But again, as I said, it's also an issue of getting more current data, and I'm happy that the government is now focusing on the production of more data that can be used, even helping for those who are engaged in this kind of a process of calculation of the Human Development Index.
Okay, so it's been launched, this report has been launched this month, I think, was it?
Yeah, it was launched actually on Monday, on 9th in Bogota.
Okay.
That was the global launch. Yes.
Yeah, let's talk about that, because here in this report I see that Seychelles has done remarkably well, and if there is perhaps any lesson that we can learn from Seychelles.
From Akim Steiner. Akim Steiner is the administrator of the UNDP, and he launched the report together with the president, His Excellency the President of Colombia. And the idea normally is to launch this report in different countries in different tiers. And there's been a lot of global publicity. And after the launch, of course, there's also been other country launches. Ourselves, we had our policy dialogue around the report. And the whole idea, as I mentioned, is to really provoke discussion. That's the whole idea, and look at some of these policy recommendations and looking at what are the things globally, regionally, internationally that we need to invest in terms of making sure we have a world that has no inequality, particularly in terms of the human progress.
Okay, so here also we have the losses to inequality are highest in the sub-Saharan Africa. Okay, why has that been so?
I think again it's about average, and you find there's still inequality, particularly in specific countries in sub-Saharan Africa. In Southern African countries, they tend to have a very high Gini coefficiency. Namibia, South Africa, I think I can spell them out. But at the same time, we also have countries that have tried to narrow down the inequalities. And I think it's all about looking at the inequalities of opportunities, looking at our own, the own legacy within African countries in terms of how some of these issues have been addressed. Some countries still have to deal with the colonial past, which kind of also perpetuated this kind of inequalities. And so the issue then is what kind of policies can we put in place that will ensure that we begin to address inequalities. So I think it is work in progress, and I think even for African continent, this is an issue which is at the center of the policy discourse. And it's for us really as organizations like UNDP, working with countries, to begin addressing areas of inadequacy in terms of the basic capabilities, but also in terms of the enhanced capabilities. Basic capabilities in areas like education, health, and then moving to higher capabilities in terms of the quality of education, quality of health that we can provide, investing in areas like vocational training, and coming up with a cadre, of professionals that are able to deal with the problems and the challenges that are very unique to the 21st century.
Mm-hmm. Education, you said, is one of those areas that we have lagged behind. But here in Eritrea,
I wouldn't say lag behind, but I think that's where the possible indicators in terms of the long expected years of schooling and meaning of schooling has not moved as faster as, for example, probably in the area of the life expectancy.
Okay. All right. Also, when we speak of inequalities, I mean women are more likely than men to be at low human development. So in Eritrea, I want you to, to see when it comes in the context of Eritrea and the role of women here in development.
Yeah. Let me first of all commend Eritrea for the central role that women continue to play, not only in the economics and the politics, but also in the whole development spectrum of the country. And I want to refer, recently we just had the 40 years celebration of the National Union of Eritrean Women. That was, of course, accompanied by the 16 days of gender activism. And I think that was important in terms of showcasing the role that women not only played during the liberation struggle for this country, but they've continued to play in the different spectrums of development. And so, in a sense, I think there's a lot that other countries can learn from Eritrea in terms of looking at the centrality of the role that women are playing. Of course, there are still areas where we can continue working together, areas like gender violence, universal issues that we are all working on. We have to look at issues in terms of social norms. These are things which, again, the world is grappling with. And if you look at the Human Development Report, they've come up with what we call the Social Norm Index. And the Social Norm Index also try to look at some of these biases that exist, globally in terms of issues of the gender inequality. And so, in a sense, I think the issue is continue building, on some of these achievements, building back and making sure that it's always 50-50. They always say that what a man can do, a woman can do even better. So what an Eritrean man can do, an Eritrean woman can do it even better.
All right, Mr. James, I think we've hit this horse too long to death. So let's talk about the current realities here in Eritrea and what levels of partnership is actually going on with the government in the development arena.
Yeah, thank you very much. As you know that UNDP is due to celebrate 25th anniversary of its presence here in Eritrea. And we are very proud, for the work we've done in this country. Importantly, of course, in the 1993 referendum, I think UNDP was in the forefront, supporting that process. And it was an important milestone, particularly for Eritrea and bring back the dignity, of Eritrean people and cherishing their own freedom and integrity. And since then, we've had excellent relationship, particularly, as I mentioned earlier, as a neutral broker and partner of choice for the government in whole spectrum of development issues, from climate change. We've been working together in the area of data and statistics. We've worked together in the area of economic governance, supporting the Office of the Audit General, partnering together in terms of just building the capacities that are needed for Eritrea to move into the next level of development. We've worked also in the area of gender, and I think we have quite a rich menu of areas of cooperation. So the relationship has been excellent, and we continue working in partnership with the government and the people of Eritrea now that there are commitments to work on achievement of Agenda 2030, the 17 SDGs, which are very ambitious. And even in terms of financing of the SDGs, it's globally, it's an issue that we are all grappling with. And the national philosophy of self-reliance, for me, I think, again, it's something we need to learn more from the Eritrean people and government, and how this has also been a motivation and a driving force in terms of pushing the country's development agenda, all the achievements that have been made, as I mentioned, in the area of health, in the area of education, I think have to do also with the national philosophy. And for us really is to see where we can partner and based on the ownership of the country's agenda. And that's how best UNDP can contribute in terms of meeting the national aspirations.
All right. Mr. James, we are running out of time. Any particular message you want to deliver?
The message I want to deliver is that UNDP continues to remain a partner of choice for the people and government of Eritrea, and to rededicate our commitment to accompany the country towards meeting its objectives and towards meeting sustainable development. And I see Eritrea as a country with a great future. And I want to be part of that great future by accompanying the country on its development path. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. James.
Thank you.
Dear viewers, that wraps up this week's Open Mic. It is good night from